Hello YouTube, welcome back to my channel. My name is Novella. Thank you for all the new subscribers. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So, I was thinking, well, 2 weeks ago I was with my friend. She has a tiny little bookstore not far from here in Sint-Truiden named Nabokov. She has excellent taste. And we were talking about, when we were teenagers, the books we read back then. And she said, well, I read stuff like Mein Kampf and Kafka and Tolstoy and Dostoevsky, and I was pretty much the same. I also read Anna Karenina and Dr. Zhivago and stuff like that. And we were talking about the fact that how much did we actually understand of those books when we were like 14, 15, 16. And that made me wonder, what if I would reread the books that I read in my teens, in the 80s? My choice was different, for sure, than somebody who lived in the States, because there was no internet. Books were available across the pond, but European books were less available in the States and vice versa. So I thought it could be interesting to do once a month or twice or 2 times a month, reread a book that I loved in my teens and reevaluate them, because I've lived a life. And I was wondering, why not? Just books that I read, I've selected a couple. There are books that were available in the States. There were books that I loved that were of not great taste, but still I enjoyed them. And there were books that were really great, but I'm not so sure if they were translated, yes or no, so I have to get into that. For instance, we have Jeroen Brouwers, Bezonken Rood. I believe that is translated. We have Milan Kundera, The Unbearable Lightness of Being. Not sure if I would like it now as much as I used to. This book made a huge impression on me when I was like 13, 14. Shogun. I really want to reread it. Absolutely do. Why not? Anna Karenina from Tolstoy. Yeah, I look a bit red because I did 30 miles on my bike. And it's really hot. And then there's a story I want to tell. When I was a teenager, I was obsessed with one Belgian author that is never translated, will never be translated. He was a naturalist like Zola and Dickens. And his name was Cyril Beuys. I was obsessed by his books. This is the guy, Cyril Beuys. When I was like 13, 14, I was obsessed with his books. And they always felt very familiar in one way or another. I couldn't place it, but it was like it was like coming home. And but Cyril Beuys lived in the same town as my grandfather did. And my grandfather lived with my parents up until his death. And I had a really fond memory of my grandfather, but he died when I was not just 5. And in 2018, I was in a weird way mourning for my granddad. I don't know where it came from, but I was mourning for him. And my granddad was, he was an American soldier in the First World War. And I thought, well, maybe I can find stuff online. And I did. I find quite a few things about his regiment, about my grandfather, when he crossed the ocean. I knew he came in 1917 to the battlefields with the Finlandia, that was his ship and everything. But then I found a couple of short stories of this man, Cyril Buys. And I thought, that's weird. Because I was looking for my granddad, and my granddad's name was in those short stories. And I started reading them. And quickly I thought, well, these are not stories that were supposed to be published, because they were published long after his death. They never really came out. You can read them in our national library, but not in the small libraries. And I started reading them, and my grandfather's name appeared in those stories. And there were funny stories, but there was no real beginning, middle, and an end in it. It was like very quickly written down, typed out, but very quickly. It was more like a train of thought, or I immediately knew that those stories were not finished. And I went to my father and I told one of those stories, and he said, that's odd. That's one of the stories that my grandfather always told. And I said, what do you mean? So apparently my grandfather was a great, great storyteller. And he went to several homes and houses, and he started telling his stories of the things he endured during the war, about his family. And every time there were at least 30, 40 people gathered around him within minutes, because he was such a good storyteller. And indeed, there was a guy always there who was writing down his stories. Turns out that is this man. So Cyril Buys used my grandfather's stories that he told about his own stupidities and about his own adventures. He wrote them down and he used them in his own books. And that's why I was like coming home in my because I heard the stories when I was very little, but I couldn't place them. And he just used them in his books, and that's why apparently I was so obsessed with Cyril Buys and his stories. They are beautiful. They are out of date. They have never been. They are too old. It's not like they came out from the 20s till the end of 30s, and they didn't age very well. It was too naturalist, and people have no connection with that way of life anymore, because we are a first world country, and poverty exists and will exist more and more, but with the gas prices, people are living in fear. And it was a little story that I really wanted to tell. Cyril Buys is still one of my favorite authors, because when I read his stories, I come home, because it's for a little bit, my grandfather I'm listening to. And it's amazing to find that out. And I'm so proud of my grandfather and and Cyril Buys, because he did a good job. He didn't. He really knew how to, because then I started rereading his stuff, and my father started retelling my grandfather's stories, and then I could place some of the things that happened, situations, anecdotes, I could place them in those stories. It was really funny. And yeah, that's a special story. I don't have that with other writers. So yeah, my plan is to read once or twice a month a book that I loved when I was in my teens, and I am really curious if I still love them or even more, and if I still am in awe with them, and if I, in my young age, really grasped them. There are books that I'm not planning on rereading because I don't feel like it, and there are books that I absolutely really want to reread, like The Assault by Harry Mullisch, Dutch author, The Golden Egg, also known as The Vanishing by Tim Krabbé, also a Dutch author. Yeah, it's fun. We have Christiane F, which was a 13-year-old prostitute who fell into drugs, and that made a huge impression on us. So that book was written in 1979. It was an autobiography of that girl. That girl wrote the book, and I remember when I was like 13, 14, it made a huge impression on us. And we had to read that book. It was mandatory. And I think it kept a lot of people away from drugs because that life wasn't very good. So yeah, it was, I think it's a nice little journey to do. And I hope you will join me maybe. And it would be interesting to read stuff that you liked, like in my case, only 20 years ago. No, it's a lot longer. But yeah, the 80s were 20 years ago, huh? Oh, yeah. And yeah, I'm curious. Hope you like it, and see you next time, probably with... These are the books that I've read so far this week. So I'm gonna talk about those. And yeah, that's it. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.